Today we explore the sad and complicated life of Richard Engelbert, a wealthy real estate agent whose secrets and hidden life resulted in his terrible murder. Living in Littleton, Colorado, Richard Engelbert was 48 years old, often seen cruising about in his elegant black BMW with the license plate Sexy Realtor. He was a well-known real estate agent in the area showing houses to customers. Richard married school principal Wendy and had a stepson called Harrison. Having earned a degree in business from the University of Colorado, he had spent more than 20 years working in real estate. Littleton people trusted Richard as he always appeared dependable and kind. Richard had a big 2-story home with a well-maintained yard. Many times, his neighbors would see him working in the yard, waving and smiling warmly to them, often supporting local Little League teams and Sunday church attendance. He participated in community activities and charitable fundraising. With a gorgeous house, a thriving business, and a loving family, Richard looked to have the ideal existence. But Richard had a hidden life. He had been sexually seeing his stepson Harrison for the previous 2 years. Richard kept this connection secret from everyone, worried it would damage his work and image. Apart from this, he kept seeing other guys for sex, utilizing the residences he displayed as covert venues of meeting. For Richard, these two lives generated a great deal of anxiety and conflict. Richard was working, negotiating transactions, and seeing customers in the days preceding his death. He often arrived home late and spent several hours at the workplace. Looking forward, a weekend trip to the Bahamas with his wife Wendy, he was trying to unwind and temporarily forget about his problems. Richard also intended to meet up with old acquaintances and savor some time away from his busy life at a 4th of July cookout at a friend's home. Richard's acquaintances said he was engaging and dynamic. He could make individuals feel significant and at ease. Richard had a nice facade, but his secret existence severely bothered him. His remorse about his affair with Harrison and the falsehoods he used to hide it become evident. He additionally concerned about Wendy learning because he thought it would ruin their marriage and his reputation in the society. Richard was a man under strain in his dying days, seeking to balance his public image with his personal agony. His aspirations of a flawless existence were gradually disintegrating and resulted in a terrible and violent conclusion. About 3:00 p.m. on June 27, 2014, Wendy Untelbert returned early from her principal's post at a school. She was looking forward a laid-back evening, maybe catching up on her favorite book, and maybe seeing some series on Netflix. Everything appeared regular at first when she strolled through Littleton, Colorado's front door of their home on Bleak Street. She yelled out for Richard from the kitchen counter, setting her keys there, but no response. A little nervous, Wendy went to investigate the basement where Richard often watched the History Channel or worked on his real estate documentation. She found it odd as she dropped down the steps because the basement door seemed to be only ajar. She once again yelled his name, louder this time, but still no reaction. She arrived at the bottom of the stairs to see a horrific sight. Richard's dead corpse lay on the floor, surrounded by evidence of a fierce battle. Richard's face was assaulted and bruised. Bloodstains were on the carpet and furnishings, clearly used to strangle him to death. A men's luxury belt was securely around his neck. Shaking her husband and furiously attempting to wake him, Wendy shouted in horror and ran to his side. Nevertheless, it was too late. Startled and disbelieving, Wendy grabbed her mobile phone and dialed 911. Her hands shook as she talked to the operator. Her voice cracked with feeling. "My spouse passed away. He has, I believe, been killed," she sobbed and battled to breathe. The operator attempted to cool her down and told her to remain on the line until the cops showed up. Hearing the disturbance, Wendy's neighbor, Luby Johnson Gantz, came over to investigate. She came, saw Wendy crying furiously on the front steps. As Wendy waited for the police, Luby remained with her, attempting to calm her. The minutes seemed like hours as Wendy's head whirled with thoughts about who may have done this and why. When the cops did show up, they quickly locked the area and walked Wendy and Luby away from the basement. Wendy was shocked and not sure she understood what had just transpired. She insisted on asking who would treat Richard this way, her mind unable to accept the horrific truth of her husband's death. Again and over again, the finding of Richard's corpse rocked the little town of Littleton. News of the murder traveled fast. Neighbors and friends gathered outside the Engelbert house to try to understand the catastrophe that had rocked their apparently ideal community. Wendy Engelbert called the Littleton Police Department urgently on June 27, 2014 at 3:15 p.m. Arriving on the scene minutes later, police under the direction of seasoned investigator Detective James Cattle, noted for his exacting methodology. On the peaceful Oak Street, the Engelbert house was rapidly encircled by police vehicles, and yellow crime scene tape was laid all around. Entering the basement, Detective Cattle and his colleagues saw a horrific sight. Richard Engelbert lay on the ground, his men's luxury belt securely around his neck. The carpet and adjacent furnishings showed bloodstains suggesting a violent battle. Detective Cattle, a spry guy in his late 40s with keen eyes and a cool head, arrived on site with a steely determination. The cops started their inquiry, gathering evidence. From many points of view, they captured every element in the picture. Carefully packaged as evidence, the belt used in the murder was inspected for fingerprints and any other hint pointing to the culprit. Detective Cattle said Richard had battled for his life based on the upturned furniture and evidence of a fight. Arriving to handle the scene, forensic professionals used luminol to identify blood trails and gathered samples for DNA testing. They painstakingly quieted the space for hair, textiles, and any other possible proof. Even the most seasoned police were startled by the violence of the murder, but they stayed concentrated on compiling all the available facts. Detective Cattle spoke with Wendy Engelbert, still in shock after learning her husband had died. She related her day and the terrible moment she came across Richard. Though she said she had no clue who may have done this, her story was emotive and thorough. Wendy had been at work at the time of the murder, hence her alibi was quickly confirmed. The cops then started rifling the area. They spoke with neighbors, including Luby Johnson Gantz, who had helped Wendy. Sarah said she heard Wendy scream and came across her on the front stairs, confused and upset. Other neighbors noted seeing Richard earlier in the day, but nothing looked unusual. In search of any clues, the police also looked into Richard's most recent phone and email data. Richard had been seeing other individuals for illegal sex, according to multiple dubious texts and calls they found. This disclosure gave the research fresh direction and indicated possible reasons connected to Richard's secret existence. Determined to identify the individual guilty for Richard Engelbert's horrific murder, the police carried on their job as the day descended into nightfall. Once the area was cleaned, Detective Cattle and his colleagues examined the gathered material in order to be ready for their next phase of inquiry. Littleton's residents watched nervously, yearning justice for Richard Engelbert and answers. Richard Engelbert's murder originally claimed his wife, Wendy Engelbert, as a suspect. Respected Littleton school principal, Wendy, 47, was intelligent and driven by nature. Having spent more than 15 years working with the school system, she was very active in community events. Her co-workers said she was constantly aiming for perfection and was authoritative and committed. On June 28, 2014, Wendy was taken in under inquiry after the murder. Leading the interview, Detective James Cattle sought to fit her behavior and feelings together. Wendy answered questions coolly, even though she seemed tired and confused. She related her working day and the terrible finding of Richard's corpse when she got home. Wendy's calmness belies her clearly angry and confused attitude. She said she had no knowledge Richard was sexually engaged with other men and expressed shock and annoyance at the affair. The disclosure of the affair heightened the suspense of the questioning as Detective Cattle dug more into Wendy's emotions about her husband's treachery. Detective Cattle inquired to Wendy about her connection with Richard. She said they had a great relationship, but she also noted they had just had some difficulties. Wendy said she had no idea Richard had a hidden life. She said she had just had a ski accident, which had made interpreting people's behavior difficult, and speculated this would be the reason she missed any indication of Richard's hidden existence. For Wendy, her alibi was strong. Attending meetings and getting ready for the next academic year, she had spent all day at the institution. Security cameras and colleagues verified her attendance at her workplace at the murder's timing. Still, her relationship to the victim qualified her as a person of interest. Detective Cattle also looked into Wendy's likely motivations. For her, reputation and career were very vital. Richard's romance jeopardized both. Wendy, however, maintained her innocence throughout the interrogation and vehemently denied any complicity in the crime. She was obliging and supplied all required requested information, including email and phone access. Searching the Engelbert house thoroughly, the police sought for any proof connecting Wendy to the murder. They came back empty-handed, therefore supporting her alibi and words. Still, the investigators were wary because emotions may inspire even the most logical people to behave desperately. After several hours of interrogation, Wendy was freed, yet she remained under close examination while the inquiry proceeded. While they investigated other leads, the cops watched her closely, tracking her activities and contacts. Richard Engelbert's murder was proving to be a difficult case with layers of reasons and secrets gradually breaking apart. The next suspect was Richard's stepson, Harrison Engelbert, 21. Harrison was a troublesome, past-oriented part-time bartender and college student. As a youngster, he had gone in and out of rehab and 12-step programs. Harrison was driven to change his life around in spite of these obstacles and was working on a psychology degree at a nearby community college. Harrison was hauled in for questioning on June 28, 2014. Knowing Harrison's connection with Richard was delicate, Detective James Cavill conducted the questioning carefully. Harrison seemed anxious but obliging, ready to tell his side of the tale. Harrison told the police he had been in a covert 2-year sexual connection with his stepfather. He spoke of being torn, battling the dishonesty in silence. After learning Richard had been cheating on him with scores of other men, utilizing properties he showed as a real estate agent as a covert meeting spot, Harrison stated he had just broken the affair. Harrison showed a combination of grief and rage throughout the questioning. Richard's lies and manipulation exposed him not only from the affair, but also from other aspects. Though he harbored hatred, Harrison said he had no intention of hurting Richard. He said he had been bartender on the murder night, and numerous attested to his alibi. Detective Cattle dug closer to Harrison's likely motivation. Although the young man's past of emotional upheaval and drug misuse begged questions, his current attempts to remain clean and concentration on his academics presented a different image. Harrison candid about his challenges and his will push advance away from the poisonous connection with Richard, looking for any proof of Harrison's participation in the crime. The police also looked into his computer gadgets and social media profiles. Though nothing specifically linked him to the murder, they discovered texts between him and Richard displaying stress and strife. Although Harrison's DNA was discovered at the murder site, this wasn't surprising since he lived in the residence. His cooperation and rock-solid alibi made it difficult for the cops to pin the crime on him. After several hours of intense interrogation, he was released, but the shadow of suspicion still loomed large. Harrison remained a key figure in the investigation, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit yet couldn't be dismissed. The police kept a close watch on his behavior, monitoring his every move, his every contact, hoping for a slip, a crack in his story, anything that might point to his involvement. But as they dug deeper, the complex web of relationships between Richard and Harrison only grew more tangled, leaving Detective Cattle and his team with more questions than answers. The truth behind Richard Engelbert's brutal murder was buried deep, and every step forward seemed to pull them further into a maze of deception and lies. As the night wore on and the detectives regrouped, one unsettling thought lingered. Was Harrison really the one they should be watching? Or was the real killer out there, hiding in the shadows, laughing at their futile efforts to uncover the truth?